Severe MMA, and I'm lucky to be sitting alongside a true legend in UK MMA, a former welterweight title challenger in the UFC, a philosopher, an analyst, a pundit. There's nothing this man doesn't do. And we're going to talk to him a little bit about the next evolution of UK MMA. Dan, when you started the Rough House, you started a golden era of UK MMA, really. Yourself and Ross Pearson and Dean and Jimmy, and there was a real kind of rise in UK MMA, and you led that charge. Here we are in London, UFC Fight Night, Bisping and Silva, arguably, besides yourself, one of the biggest UK names. But I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on the undercard and the guys coming up. Who really sticks out to you as perhaps somebody who can take the mantle of the future of UK MMA? Is there anybody yet?
Well, I think if we start at the top of the card and work down, I mean, the obvious one is Tom Breeze. I mean, he's a clear standout. He's had 2 fights in the UFC so far. He's looked amazing. He's got a very measured performance. There's no rush to anything that he's doing. He's not taking any unnecessary risks. He's very disciplined in every range of the game. And he's preparing at one of the best camps in the world. You know, I mean, that can't be undersold enough. I've spent time on the mat at TriStar, and even the guys that you've never heard of before are just monsters. They're dangerous because they're training with the best every week, you know. And then that Saturday morning sparring session, when they have people from all around the area come together, you get sort of 50, 60 people on the mat. It forces you to evolve, you know, and he's in the right place. I mean, when I was first starting out, myself and Paul Daly, we'd dip our toe in with that, but obviously there wasn't the money for that. There wasn't a setup where we could go to a gym and stay at the gym there. So it was a case of like staying in some kind of travel lodge or whatever, and near American Top Team or Econo Lodge across the road from Team Quest or whatever. And we jumped in and we did it a bit, and then we stepped back out and we came back to Rough House, and at the time that was what worked for us. But the reality is now you can go to a gym and get everything you want, and that just wasn't the case then. I mean, even though we would go to American Top Team or a Team Quest, I would still feel like there would be an emphasis on a particular element of the game, and at TriStar you're not going to get that. And you know, when it was the Rough House boys and we were all training together, the way that we kind of got around that, and the reason really that I think we kind of led the way in Europe as far as particularly the lighter weight classes, was because we were all self-driven. We all had our own goals and our own needs and desires for training. I loved to go out to the US to train. Paul obviously liked to go over to Holland and train. He had a good relationship with Mike's gym out there, and I obviously spent a lot of time with Eddie Bravo. We did Team Quest and all the places as well. So I know Jimmy's been out to train with Extreme Couture as well. So we were all kind of self-led and self-motivated. But the beauty was that no matter where we went, we always came back to put it all in the same pot. And Rough House never really had coaches. I mean, we had individual coaches. I had my coaches, and we'd have certain people that would work with the team. But also, I mean, people always got confused about Rough House. They always thought it was a gym. It never existed as a place. You know, it was a mentality. It was a group of people that came together that basically supported each other's dreams by helping each other. Now, you know, you've got, I mean, Tom Breeze is the obvious one. Going out to Montreal, he's stepping into a gym which offers him everything that he needs. And not only is he in the right place, but he's 6'3". He's a massive welterweight. He uses his range very well, and he, you know, he's young and he's humble, and that is going to keep him in the game a lot longer, because it's going to keep him realistic about where he's at. If he's fighting someone that's going to challenge him, he's going to be able to assess that and fix it. And if he's training at TriStar, he's going to be surrounded by people that are constantly going to be making him ask those questions.
We've talked about Tom for a little bit. I believe he's the UK's best shot at UFC gold.
Yep.
Not in the next year. I think that would be a rush. But Tom Breeze is the future. Let's look at a guy like Arnold Allen, because you know, this is a kid that comes in on short notice for his first fight. His first 2 rounds probably didn't go as well as he wanted, but he, you know, that British bite down on your gum shield, and I'm going to win no matter what comes through. Do you see, is Arnold someone that, you know, is that a kid to keep an eye on? Because we know he's got power in his hands, we know he's got heart, we also know he's very young.
Yeah.
Is there a future star there?
Without a doubt. You know, another thing that you have to say about him, same as Tom Breeze, he's a great athlete. You know, and and I've never been particularly a great athlete. I've always made up. I didn't. I mean, my fights were won on tenacity and on willpower and on just a constant work rate, on being able to put it on my opponents. But when you have that natural mentality like Tom Breeze does and like Arnold Allen do, and you also have that athletic ability to go with it, that's when you get a complete fighter that can be a champion. And you know, I mean, I fell short at the title fight to a guy that's at the time was probably the best athlete that mixed martial arts had ever seen. May still
athlete
be.
Canada's ever produced, without question.
So you know, and I felt that difference in the fight. You know, he was quicker than me. He was able to you know, change direction in a second, where I had to like adjust and think and readjust my balance. So it's nice to see now that the talent pool in the UK is now integrating some really good athletes into it as well. I mean, Arnold Allen is right at the beginning of his career. He's had one fight in the UFC so far, and I mean, he came through some adversity and he looked good. And I think for a debut fight, he got everything he needed to out of that. You know, I think this next fight going on to the weekend is his opportunity to kind of really embrace the fact that he's in the UFC now, to embrace the fact that he has arrived at the organisation that he wants to do his career in.
What do you say to those people, and it's usually the casual fan as opposed to the real MMA fan, that would look at a card like this and say, well, you know, we've got Bisping and Silva, that's huge, but for a UK MMA fan, this should be nirvana. We've got 9 guys on the card, from the top to the bottom. Does it frustrate you still that the UK's mentality towards the sport is still quite fractured? And shouldn't we all be behind Breeze and ask him, like, as a country, shouldn't we be behind all of these guys and pushing them? And why don't we?
I definitely think we should, and I think part of the reason is I think the UFC can work harder with that. I think we need to be pushing these athletes out more, and I think there are a lot of media sources, particularly in Europe, that are still a little bit cautious of the UFC, and I think that this event is changing that. I mean, I've done interviews for media outlets that I would never thought I would speak to for this event, and the media scrum this morning was full of new faces, people that I'd never seen before. You know, we've just signed a deal with BBC, which is huge. For not only for, I mean, that signing with the BBC is like signing with Reebok for Euro. Yeah. You know, it brings legitimacy to the sport. Whereas in the US, people want to be tied to a good brand. In the UK, they want to be tied to a good news outlet, and that is the BBC. You can't really go. You know, you can't really do wrong with the BBC. So that alone, being an outlet, is gonna push all these upcoming athletes into the forefront and allow them to communicate with the fans and just to tell their stories. You know, if you speak to any of the UK fighters on the card, the beautiful thing is that they're spread from up and down the country, different backgrounds, different gyms, different areas, different training partners and stuff, different mentalities, and every fighter is going to have people that they can speak to and relate to in the general public, and that's what's going to pull people in and educate them about the athletes that we have.
I'm not going to keep. I'm going to ask you 2 more questions and then I'm going to let you go. You said before we rolled that the one thing you can't do is predictions. So I'm not going to ask you to predict fights, but what I am going to ask you to, which fight do you think is dark horse for a fight of the night? I don't care who wins, but which of those matchups do you think perhaps is a sleeper for fight of the night?
Well, the obvious one that comes to mind, and I think some people would argue that it's not a sleeper, is the last fight on the undercard. I mean, Mike Wilkinson, he's not had a consistent career in the UFC. He's not been as active as he needs to be a contender. But he has a fight to open up 2016 against a guy that has starched 2 opponents in less than 2 minutes total. He's got the speed, he's got the talk, he's got the looks, he's got the brash attitude, and these 2 guys have been going at each other all week. I mean, there's no love lost between them. So, I mean, just that alone, you can tell they're both up for it. I mean, Mike Wilkinson is a very tough fighter. He's much more of a basics kind of fighter. He likes to make sure he does things by the book and make sure he doesn't make the mistakes that other fighters would. Whereas Makwan Amirkhani is much more of a momentum fighter. He likes to feel the pace of the fight, and if he feels it's going his way, he'll slowly start to put his foot on the gas. Sometimes he'll just put his foot on the gas straight off,
away, 8 seconds.
But you know, they're different fighters in those aspects. I mean, obviously Mike Wilkinson had that knockout over Nicholas Backstrom, but there wasn't a plan to come out and blast him out of the water for that one. It was a strategic plan that just paid off in the right way, and that's Mike's strength in this fight. Whereas Macklin, he's the chaos, he's the chaos element that can kind of be unpredictable and catch him off guard. So I think that one for me is going to be one of the best fights of the night. The other one, if I have to pick a real sleeper, is I think it's either the first or second fight on the card. Is the two Ultimate Fighter guys. I mean, we've got David Seymour, who in the house was a wrecking machine. He was so aggressive, so reckless, and I obviously love watching those kind of styles. I like risk takers. And he's fighting Martin Svensson, who's a technician on the ground, who is definitely not afraid of getting into a fight, definitely not afraid of taking a few punches. But two contrasting styles: an aggressive striker that don't mind exchanging on the ground, and an aggressive grappler that doesn't mind standing on the feet and trading as well. So I think that's going to be the other added element as well. I could talk for ages on these fights, but the other added element, they spent time in the house together. They trained side by side with Conor McGregor, who must have imparted some amazing knowledge to them over that 6-week period, and now they've gone away to their own teams and implemented that. So it's which one's going to come back to the table and make the best use of it.
I'm glad you mentioned Conor, because I have to being from Severe MMA, we have to talk Conor. I was very excited about Conor trying to replicate what he did with his past promotion, going for the two simultaneous weight classes. Mm-hmm. Nick Diaz is a fine opponent in 170. Nick, sorry. One of the Diaz brothers is a great opponent at 170.
Either of them.
Is it a bigger fight, a better fight, or none of the above?
Honestly, it's a better build-up. I think it may be a better fight for entertainment perspectives, but RDA is the fight. Yeah. RDA is the fight because he's the champion. And if Conor McGregor is going to call out everybody out and say he can step up and take belts in whatever weight class he wants to be in, the UFC gave him that opportunity. He was there. He had the belt right in front of him. So ultimately, everybody's going to want to see that. Now, personally, if we could go back to the night he won the featherweight title, for me, the next step would have been to stay at featherweight and to defend that belt. Having said that, he's moved up to lightweight. I would have liked to have seen him fight at least one contender first. My pick would have been a Cowboy or a Nate Diaz, or obviously an Anthony Pettis, with him not being on a slide. But having stepped straight in against the champion, now I kind of feel like, it's not necessarily a step down to fight Nate Diaz, but it's definitely a sidestep. It's not the result that he wanted. And it's a big risk fight because Nate Diaz can definitely win this fight. You can't count him out. He's a tall, rangy guy. He's a tricky guy. He's not going to be swayed by Conor's attitude and his psychological tactics. And he's also got a better opportunity than what he asked for in the first place. You think about his post-fight interview with Michael Johnson. He said, "I want Conor McGregor. He's stealing from me. He's taking what I've worked hard to build." So now, what he wanted out of that was a fight with Conor McGregor. What now he gets is the opportunity to knock Conor McGregor off his pedestal and take him away from that lightweight title shot. Because the reality is, if he loses to Nate Diaz, you can't put him in there against a lightweight title fighter. It doesn't make sense. It wouldn't be fair. So Nate Diaz could really ruin the parade now by taking that lightweight title fight away from him when it was already in front of him in the first place.
Are you surprised that Conor took the fight?
Not at all.
No.
I have a lot of respect for him because you've got to. The reality is Nate Diaz is a tough fight. There are easier fights out there for him. And going up to 170 as well, that's two weight classes above his championship. My concern now is him going back to featherweight and making that.
Yeah, that was gonna be if the fight goes the way Conor expects it to, which is he's gonna finish. Do you ever see him going back to? Do you ever see him wanting to cut back down to face a Frankie Edgar, perhaps? Because I think that's the legacy fight at featherweight. Yeah. You fight with Frankie Edgar, a win there, and you did clean that division out. Yeah. But the rumors are that he will never go back there. What do you honestly do? You think with a result at welterweight, we'll see him compete lightweight but never feather again? I always thought he looked quite gaunt on the scales at featherweight, and I always thought that he was, he'd stepped into the UFC in the right weight class. Featherweight was ideal for his first campaign, but it was always obvious that his body was going to outgrow that weight class, and I think that now, just the window of time that he's given himself to allow his body to grow
into the weight class, it's going to be very difficult to get back down to 45. You know, you got to think. He always made 45, but he always looked gaunt on the scales. Even add 3 pounds to his frame, and then try and take that extra 3 pounds out of him again. It makes him a different fighter. I really think it does. I would much rather see him vacate the featherweight belt, focus on the lightweight division, have 5 or 6 good fights, and then even consider moving up to welterweight if that's what he feels comfortable with doing. I think he could potentially harm his legacy by going back down to featherweight, especially when you've got someone like Frankie Edgar who's there waiting to put you under pressure for 25 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a big ask to make that weight again. And having said that, I think it's unfair for Frankie to call Conor the dual weight champion if he doesn't ever go down and defend that belt. You know. The other thing as well is, you know, we've got John Jones coming back soon, and I've been talking about this with fans around the hotel. In my opinion, John Jones could be the first dual weight champion, like actual dual weight champion, a person that moves between weight classes and defends a heavyweight, defends a light heavyweight, and goes back and forth. Now, if Conor never goes back down to featherweight again, in my opinion, he was never a dual champion, even if he beat RDA this weekend. You know, because he's not defended belts consecutively.
Yeah, that makes.
And when I was
Daniel Cormier might have an argument to say about your
John Jones argument.
maybe. And honestly, if he can prove to me that he can beat John Jones, he deserves the belt. But even Cormier will say to himself, he doesn't feel like he's the champion until he beats John Jones. Honestly, you know. I discussed it with Alex Gustafsson. He says the same thing. He's got to beat John Jones. He's got to beat the man that held the belt
and never lost it.
Dan, we've kept you for 20 minutes longer than I said we were going to. Thank you ever so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.